So, one of my favorite reasons, and the reason I chose the Persian Empire, was because of this. The area they covered was unreal. And the fact that they let people have their religion, have their culture, obviously till Darius III, that ruined it all. That's where the downfall of the empire began. But this is amazing that they could keep all this in control because people live their lives normally just with taxes. That was the only difference. So that's probably my favorite thing and the big reason why I chose the Persian Empire. Um, Now going on to the body analysis, the head, the significant leaders and accomplishments. I think one of the most influential leaders was Cyrus the Great. He defeated kingdoms such as Media, Lydia, and Babylonian, joining them under one empire rule called the Persian Empire. Other leaders that were also influential were Darius and Cambyses. Onto the hands. Architecture, technological advancements. In the 1870s, smugglers discovered gold and silver artifacts among the ruins of the Oxus River in present-day Tajikistan. And doing this, they carved rock reliefs into cliffs and also were known for their metalwork. Onto the legs. Labor systems. Slaves, as every empire in ancient times, worked the fields for the middle class and the peasants. Kings were at the top, like a feudal system, who ruled the labor systems. Peasants were usually the backbone of the economy, where farmers are either skilled or unskilled labor. Onto spine, political structure. The three main kings were Darius, Cambyses, Cyrus the Great, who all ruled at different times and had different political structures, but most of them had the no-tolerance policy. They were great and they helped Southeast Asia politically and economically. And then the ribs, the social structure. The empire ran in a feudal system because slaves were at the bottom with peasants and at the top were the kings. Heart, religious beliefs. This empire accepted religious toleration, especially with Cyrus the Great, like I said before and at the beginning, where they did not force a single religion to the people, and there were temple communities and much more. Onto the pen. Persian literature was very great. It was composed of oral compositions and written texts in their languages and is one of the world's oldest literatures. Onto the feet. Trade routes, goods, etc. Trade routes were in every direction that had rich deposits of metals, other resources. Mostly gold. Gold made Persia very, very rich and controlled the agricultural areas of Mesopotamia. Onto the autopsy report. The autopsy report, the date was 330, performed by Arian. It was in Persia. The name of the empire, Persian Empire. The birth was 6th century. Death was 20th century. Empire's race was Persian. The death was over 200 years. The government was bureaucracy. The empires conquered Macedonian Empire, and the invasion was by Alexander the Great. Here's the detailed report and how it happened. Alexander learned that they had to resolve to continue their journey by night. He asked the natives of the place if he knew a shortcut by which they could help catch up to them, who was Darius. They said they did, but the way was through an uninhabited country and there was no water, but that didn't hold Alexander back. Alexander himself then started off again at dusk, with all the speed he could make and covering the 80 kilometers in course of the night. Came up with the Persians just as dawn was breaking. They were struggling along, unarmed, only a few made offer of resistance, most of them incontinently fled the moment as they saw it. Alexander took this as an opportunity. Those who attempted to fight also made off after losing a few men. Festus and his friends did not abandon the attempt to get Darius away in a wagon. But when Alexander closed upon them, their wound proved fatal, and shortly Darius died. Before Alexander could see him, he sent Darius' body to Persepolis to be buried in the royal tombs like kings before. Such was the end of Darius. He died in July, during the archonship of Artaxerxes on Athens. In military matters, he was feeblest and most incompetent man in other spheres. His conduct appeared to be moderate and decent. And lastly, the obituary. The Persian Empire was one of the greatest empires in the world. It had many influential leaders, had lots of resources, and life was well for almost everyone. One of the influential leaders was Cyrus the Great, like I said before. He defeated many kingdoms, and he was just great. The three main kings were Darius, Cambyses, and Cyrus the Great, who all ruled at different times and all had amazing rules. Slaves were a big factor in the Persian Empire because they worked in the fields for the middle class and peasants, while the kings were at the top and ruled the labor system. Peasants were, as usual, the backbone of the economy, as they were largely either skilled or unskilled laborers. The empire accepted religiously toleration, especially with Cyrus the Great, where they did not force a single people to a single religion. During this time, there were temples and everything, because you could be any religion. The Persian Empire is also known for its literature because it's composed of oral compositions and written texts in their language and is one of the world's oldest literatures. For Persia, there were many trade routes in every direction and rich deposits of metals and other resources. Lastly, and most importantly, the way Persia died down was when Darius III died due to the invasion of Alexander the Great, who killed him and buried him with the other emperors. This was my autopsy on the empire, and these are my 5 sources. Thank you.